everyone, welcome back to the Incredible India podcast series. I'm Sam.
And I'm Taylor.
So imagine you are an 18th century warrior king, right? You're aggressively fighting off the British Empire, and you desperately need money to fund your endless military campaigns.
Right, which is no small feat.
Exactly. So what do? Do you just raise taxes? Do you plunder neighboring territories? Or, do you invent a hyper-specialized wooden toy startup?
Which sounds completely wild. But today we are actually taking a deep dive into a small town in Karnataka called Channapatna, or as it's affectionately known in Canada, Gumbagala Oru, which translates to the town of toys.
The town of toys. It's just such a great name. Our mission for this deep dive is to really explore this unbroken craft tradition that stretches back like 250 years.
Yeah, it's a journey that connects that fearsome warrior king, a highly improbable early 20th century Japanese design expedition, and somehow the White House.
All through the lens of these incredibly unique, eco-friendly wooden toys. Now, for you listening, we're using a travel itinerary based on 5 Senses Tours as our foundation for this.
Because they actually take you right into these specific workshops, which is amazing.
Right. But what we are really unpacking today is this massive, fascinating story of ancient economic policy and really a living cultural heritage.
And I think it's crucial to understand right from the outset that this isn't just, some quaint story about carving wood.
No, not at all.
It is basically a masterclass in how a specific community has kept a highly localized, specialized craft alive against globalization, industrialization, and mass production.
Yeah, and to understand how a community even pulls that off, we have to travel back to the late 1700s. When I was looking through our sources for this deep dive, I was immediately struck by the protagonist of this origin story.
Tipu Sultan.
Yes, the Tiger of Mysore. I mean, he was arguably the most formidable military adversary the British East India Company ever faced in South India. But this story doesn't actually start on a battlefield.
No, it starts with a surprisingly modern approach to international trade. Tipu Sultan looked at Channapatna, which was just this small, relatively unassuming town about 60 kilometers from his capital at Srirangapatna.
Right.
And he made this highly calculated decision to transform it into the toy capital of India.
Okay, wait, I have to push back on that for a second. Why toys? If you are a military commander fighting off colonial powers, state building is expensive, wars are incredibly expensive.
Oh, absolutely.
Investing in tiny wooden tops and dolls seems like, the absolute last thing you would prioritize.
Well, that is exactly why it's so brilliant.
Yeah.
He wasn't just casually supporting the arts because he liked pretty things. He needed export revenue.
Oh, okay.
The kingdom desperately needed an influx of foreign currency. And to get that, you need to produce something that no one else in the world has, but everyone wants.
Right.
He realized that highly crafted, durable, visually stunning wooden objects could be a massive luxury export.
So how does he actually execute this? Because you can't just, declare a town the toy capital and expect it to magically happen overnight.
You bring in the experts. The historical record shows he actively invited Persian artisans to travel all the way to Channapatna.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and their specific mandate was to train the local craftsmen in the advanced arts of woodwork and lacquerware. Plus, he provided massive infrastructural support.
Which you would need.
Exactly. Backed by his minister, Dewan Purnia Pandit, Tipu Sultan allocated 25 to 30 acres of land specifically for 250 to 300 artisans to live and work.
Okay, I was trying to think of a modern equivalent for this while reading the sources, and it really sounds less like a royal hobby and more like a monarch creating a state-sponsored export processing zone.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it.
It's basically a 1700s version of a Silicon Valley startup incubator, but built exclusively for wooden crafts to generate international capital.
That is a highly accurate way to frame it, actually. He even utilized a specific location called the Darya Dolat Bag for the commercial side of this enterprise.
Oh, I have to mention the translation of that name in the sources because it is so literal it made me laugh. It literally translates to water or overseas, wealth, park, or meeting place.
I know, it completely gives the game away. There's just zero ambiguity about its purpose.
Literally none.
It was a dedicated space to hold high-stakes meetings with overseas traders. He wanted the Persian, Egyptian, Chinese, and Turkish merchants who visited to see these toys recognize their unique value, buy them in bulk, and carry them back across the globe.
To sell at a massive premium, obviously.
Exactly. He understood that localized craft could act as a strict, powerful economic policy.
That economic foresight is just impressive. But let's fast forward because the story takes a wildly unexpected turn. How does a craft, which is entirely rooted in 18th century Persian techniques, survive and evolve over a century later?
Yeah, this part is wild.
The sources point to this incredibly unlikely international cultural exchange in 1904.
Right. So Tipu Sultan's original patronage was strategically brilliant, but the Maharaja of Mysore in 1904 made a decision that was equally visionary. He sponsored a local man named Bavas Miyan to travel all the way to Japan.
Okay, let me stop you right there. Bavas Miyan was a superintendent at the Government Industrial School in rural Channapatna,
Yep.
1904. How does a superintendent of a rural industrial school even communicate with Japanese artisans back then?
It's a fair question.
That sounds incredibly impractical, almost impossible for a Maharaja to fund. We're talking about a time way before instant translation or, like, globalized travel routes.
It totally seems impossible if you think about it purely in terms of spoken language. But you have to remember, they were speaking the universal language of craftsmanship.
Ah, okay.
Bavas Miyan's mission wasn't to go to Tokyo to read textbooks or attend lectures. He was sent to visually and mechanically study advanced Japanese lacquerware and toy-making techniques.
So he's just watching them work.
Exactly. He was observing the specific types of lathes the Japanese used, the angles of their chisels, and, how they structure their production lines.
So he was basically executing an early 20th century corporate espionage mission, just culturally sanctioned.
Yeah,
He's looking at the physical mechanics of how Japan is producing superior wooden goods faster.
Precisely. The goal was to figure out how to improve production efficiency back home in Karnataka and to reduce the grueling manual labor required for each individual toy without sacrificing the quality.
Right.
And the consequences of Bavas Miyan's trip are literally sitting on the shelves of Channapatna shops today. He didn't just bring back theoretical efficiency models, he brought back specific mechanical designs.
Like the wobbling doll.
Yes, exactly. If you have ever seen those wooden dolls with the rounded bases, the ones you push over, and the weighted bottom forces them to immediately wobble back up to a standing position.
Yeah, I love that.
That is Bavas Miyan's direct legacy.
It's so fascinating because he had to figure out how to translate a Japanese design principle into local Indian materials.
Right, the physics of it.
Exactly. He absorbed the physics of the Japanese wobbling doll, calculated the exact center of gravity required, and then figured out how to replicate that using the specific density of the local wood available in Karnataka.
Which is incredible. You literally have Tipu Sultan's 18th century Persian connection layered seamlessly with Bavas Miyan's 20th century Japanese mechanical translation.
And all flowing through a single town 60 kilometers from Bangalore.
The historical layering is epic.
It really is. But stepping away from the history for a second, let's look at the actual physical creation of these toys. Because this is where ancient tradition meets what we now desperately try to achieve with modern sustainability.
Oh, totally.
I want to break down exactly how these toys are made because the science behind it is incredible.
It really is. And it all starts with the foundational material. The artisans use a locally grown wood called hale wood, which is also known as ivory wood.
What makes hale wood so special for this specific craft?
Well, it comes down to its cellular structure. It's an incredibly soft wood, very light, and crucially, it has a very close, tight grain.
Meaning it's easy to carve.
Exactly. It can be carved and shaped perfectly smooth without splintering, and it requires absolutely no synthetic chemicals to treat or prepare it.
Which brings us to the lathe. Now, if you listening have never used or seen a lathe, picture a motorized machine that holds a block of wood horizontally and spins it around incredibly fast.
Very fast.
Yeah, and as the wood is twirling at high speed, the artisan takes sharp tools and carves away the excess wood to create perfectly rounded, edgeless shapes.
The shaping is impressive, but the application of color is where the true genius of Channapatna lies. They do not paint the wood with a brush.
Right.
They rely entirely on friction.
This is the exact mechanism that blew my mind in the research. It's less like painting and much more like natural welding.
That is the perfect way to describe it. So while the carved wooden toy is still mounted on the lathe and spinning at high speed, the artisan takes a solid stick of colored lac, which is a natural resin,
Okay.
and they press it firmly against the spinning wood.
So the sheer friction of the lac stick pressing against the fast spinning wood creates intense heat.
Exactly.
And that localized heat instantly melts the lac resin, and the rotational force spreads it evenly across the surface. It's like an ancient version of 3D printing or fusion.
It really is.
Because the wood is porous and the lac is melted by heat, the color doesn't just sit on top like a synthetic paint. It actually fuses directly into the cellular structure of the wood.
It melts the dye deeply into the grain. You are effectively permanently bonding the color to the material.
That's wild.
And that fusion gives the toy a richness, a depth, and a glossy durability that a paintbrush could never physically achieve. It requires immense, highly calibrated skill.
I bet.
The craftsman has to know intuitively exactly how much pressure to apply, at what precise angle, and for exactly how many milliseconds, all while the wood is a blur of motion.
And the colors they are melting into this wood are completely natural.
100% natural. They use vegetable dyes mixed into the lac resin. So turmeric gives them the bright yellow, spinach provides the deep green, and beetroot creates the vibrant red.
And then for the finishing touch, instead of spraying it with a toxic chemical varnish to make it shiny, they just take a handful of dried palm leaves and hold them against the spinning toy.
Just palm leaves.
Right. The mild abrasion of the palm leaves polishes the fused lac until it develops a brilliant glass-like shine.
The end result is a toy that is entirely chemical-free, perfectly rounded, edgeless, and completely safe for a child who will, inevitably put it in their mouth.
Which brings us to a really stark, almost tragic reality in this timeline. Despite achieving this kind of sustainable, non-toxic perfection 2 centuries ago, these ancient toys recently faced an existential threat that almost wiped them off the map completely.
Yeah, it's a very sobering chapter. Right around the turn of the 21st century, the Indian market was suddenly flooded with cheap, mass-produced Chinese plastic toys.
The irony is almost painful. I mean, we are currently spending billions of dollars today utilizing massive technological effort, desperately trying to invent sustainable, non-toxic, eco-friendly goods.
Unbelievable.
Meanwhile, the artisans of Channapatna had already perfected that exact process, and they were almost driven into bankruptcy by toxic plastics.
It raises a very uncomfortable question about modern consumerism. What we actually value and what are we willing to pay for? The artisans in Channapatna simply couldn't compete on volume or the artificially low price of injection-molded plastic.
Of course not.
Demand plummeted drastically, and the multi-generational industry was pushed to the absolute brink of closure. Families who had done this for 2 centuries were considering abandoning the craft entirely.
So how did they survive the plastic flood?
Well, it required a multi-pronged intervention. First, the Karnataka Handicrafts Development Corporation stepped in to help revive the craft, providing vital training for artisans to adapt their traditional designs to changing modern market trends.
So creating things like corporate gifts, modular puzzles, things beyond just traditional dolls.
Exactly.
And the sources heavily emphasize the role of responsible cultural tourism here, too. Organizations like Five Senses Tours started bringing travelers directly into the Channapatna workshops.
Which makes a huge difference.
It's crucial because it allows you to bypass the middlemen and buy straight from the artisans, which injects vital capital directly into the community's hands.
And that direct capital injection stabilized them. But then came a massive formal recognition that changed everything. In 2006, the Channapatna toys and dolls were officially granted a Geographical Indication tag, a GI tag, by the government of India.
Now, for those who might not know, a GI tag is a massive deal in international trade.
Oh, absolutely.
It gives these toys the exact same protected, highly localized status as Darjeeling tea, Kanchipuram silk, or authentic champagne. It legally certifies that these specific toys are unique, irreplaceable, and inextricably linked to the geography, materials, and culture of this one specific town.
Right.
You cannot legally make a wooden toy in a factory in another country and call it a Channapatna toy.
And that GI tag acted as an incredible shield, and it helped propel them back to global fame. Just 4 years later, in 2010, U.S. First Lady Michelle Obama visited India, saw the toys, and purchased several of them.
Wow.
And then when President Barack Obama visited in January 2015, the Indian government officially gifted these toys to him.
Think about that trajectory, from an 18th century export market designed by a warrior king to a near-death experience against cheap plastics, straight into the Obama White House.
It really demonstrates the profound resilience of these artisan families. They kept making the toys during the darkest days of the plastic flood simply because it was their heritage. Yeah. They literally did not know how to stop being who they were.
Yeah.
And eventually, the world caught back up to them.
You mentioned the toys survived because they are part of a living economy, but this town doesn't just spin wood, it spins silk.
Yes.
Literally right down the road in nearby Ramanagara, you can witness another ancient craft operating at a massive, almost industrial scale.
It's incredible to see.
The survival of these living economies is the real through line here. Let's talk about the Ramanagara silk cocoon auction, because this completely rewired my brain.
Same here. It is Asia's largest silk cocoon auction market. And the word auction really doesn't capture the sheer overwhelming scale and energy of this place.
No, it doesn't sound like it.
Thousands of silk farmers from across the entire district arrive every single day with absolute mounds of golden cocoons.
Golden cocoons, even the visual of that is stunning. But I was stuck on the mechanics of this in the research. How exactly does this auction work? Because they're dealing with organic material, not like standardized widgets.
Right. It is a massive sensory and logistical experience. You have these huge, vibrant piles of cocoons piled right on the auction floor.
Okay.
Buyers, who are the silk reelers, that will eventually turn these cocoons into the raw thread used for world-famous Mysore silk saris, they have to evaluate the product with lightning speed before bidding.
But how do you evaluate a cocoon at lightning speed? You can't just look at the color and know if it's good silk, can you?
Exactly, you can't. Buyers aren't just looking at the golden hue. They're physically checking the cocoon's weight-to-silk ratio and feeling the firmness of the shell.
Why the firmness?
Well, a softer cocoon is a massive risk. It means the silk thread might break when it's placed on the high-speed reeling machine later, which ruins the yield. So they plunge their hands into the piles, feeling the density, calculating the potential yield in seconds.
Wow. And then the auction happens in real time, with farmers and buyers negotiating loudly and rapidly in Canada.
Very loudly.
The sources also mention the distinct smell of the enormous auction hall. It's filled with the scent of fresh cocoons, which is described as warm, earthy, and faintly sweet. I have to ask, when you actually stand on that auction floor and witness this chaotic, high-stakes commercial grading process, how does it change your understanding of this silk compared to just seeing it in a museum?
Oh, it completely shatters the illusion of passive heritage. When you look at a finished silk sari in a quiet, climate-controlled museum display, it's static.
Right.
It's beautiful, yes, but it is entirely disconnected from the raw human energy and the intense agricultural economy that created it. Witnessing the auction forces you to understand that this heritage is a living, breathing, high-stakes economy.
That makes so much sense.
You see generations of accumulated knowledge in how quickly a buyer can gauge the firmness of a shell. It transforms your concept of tradition from something dusty into something incredibly vital and urgent.
I love that. It's not a relic. It's how thousands of families literally put food on the table today.
Exactly.
But speaking of museums, there actually is a museum nearby that completely flips the traditional static museum concept on its head. It perfectly aligns with this idea of living heritage. It's called Channapatna.
Yes, run by the Karnataka Channapatna Trust. This is arguably one of the most underappreciated cultural institutions in the entire region. It's an expansive, completely open-air folk art museum located right on the Bangalore-Mysore highway.
Let's dig into why being outdoors is so important here. Because initially I thought, okay, an outdoor museum, that just means you have to walk in the heat.
Right.
But it's actually an ideological choice, isn't it?
It absolutely is an ideological choice. Think about seeing a giant, painted terracotta horse, a shrine figure, in a quiet, sterile museum room with white walls and halogen spotlights.
It feels dead.
It does. It's been surgically removed from its context. Channapatna documents the full breadth of Karnataka's rural folk traditions: large wooden sculptures, terracotta figurines from village shrines, massive agricultural tools, and artifacts from traditional folk theater.
And it displays them outside in the natural light, the wind, and the open space they were originally designed for.
Precisely. Now imagine seeing that same terracotta horse under the harsh Indian sun with wind blowing dust around it, right where a farmer would have originally placed it to protect their crops.
It completely changes the energy of the object.
It does. It's an archive of the cultural life of India's rural communities, representing vital traditions that aren't necessarily on a polished academic UNESCO list, but are deeply rooted in the soil of everyday life.
And if we are talking about things deeply rooted in the landscape of this region, we have to mention the big banyan tree, or Dada Aladamara.
Oh, nature's most extraordinary living monument in Karnataka.
We are talking about a single tree that is over 400 years old. Its aerial roots have grown down into the ground, thickened into new trunks, and expanded across an area of approximately 3 acres.
3 acres.
It looks like an entire dense forest, but genetically and physically, it is a single living organism.
3 acres of canopy from one seed. The sheer scale of it is difficult to comprehend until you are standing underneath it.
The canopy is so massive and the shade so absolute that it literally used to shelter a bustling marketplace beneath it.
Which is wild to picture.
Hundreds of traders, buyers, and travelers operating an entire localized economy in the shade of a single biological organism. It perfectly mirrors the interconnectedness of the artisans, the silk farmers, and the land itself.
It really is the perfect counterpoint to the intense heat of the workshops and the loud chaos of the auction floor. It requires absolutely no historical context or mechanical knowledge to appreciate. You just stand beneath a 400-year-old living canopy and let the immense scale of it wash over you.
As we start to wrap up this deep dive, let's look back at the incredible journey we've just tracked today.
It is a remarkable timeline.
Yeah.
We started 250 years ago with Tipu Sultan, a warrior king fighting colonial expansion who recognized that the unique woodwork of Channapatna could be an economic powerhouse. He invited Persian artisans to formalize the craft, creating an early export processing zone. Over a century later, a local superintendent named Bavas Miyan traveled to Japan, decoded the mechanics of foreign lacquerware, and brought back the physics for the iconic wobbling dolls.
Then we fast-forwarded through a near collapse caused by a flood of cheap, toxic plastic, only to see a massive resurgence fueled by geographical protection, responsible cultural tourism, and a global pivot toward sustainability.
Exactly. Landing these vegetable-dyed, friction-polished wooden marvels squarely in the Obama White House. It is a story anchored by generations of artisans who simply refuse to let their localized craft disappear.
It is such a powerful story of human resilience and the hidden mechanics of the things we buy. And it leaves me with a final thought I want you to ponder today. Take a look around you. Look at the seemingly ordinary decorative objects, the souvenirs, or the toys sitting on your own shelves right now.
Yeah.
We tend to take these everyday items entirely for granted. But what hidden centuries of global trade, what strategic royal patronage, or what improbable cross-cultural mechanical exchanges might be resting right there in your living room, completely unnoticed? If you decide to travel to Channapatna, we have a recommendation. 5 Senses Tours organizes tours across India which are immersive cultural experiences. You can email contact@fivesensestours.com. Note 5 is written as a numeral in contact at fivesensestours.com. Or WhatsApp to +919 845 67446.